you a bit of that product, show you a bit of workflow that the UI UX team has been coming up with Roop, and some architectural decisions and setup that Schwenker and Jamie have been working through, and then let you know about what our goals are for Sprint 3. I also just wanted to let you know that this is going to be recorded, and Adrian will be pasting this on a Teams channel for us to view in the future if you ever want to look at a recording. And also, we welcome your feedback, questions, comments. We have space planned for that at the end of the session today. And likely this won't take an hour and a half, but we have given space in case people do want to get into deep discussion. So I will now pass the microphone to you, Elise, and you can tell us about what we've been up to.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. So welcome, everybody. I'm looking at the numbers, and that's pretty awesome to have so many folks join us today. And you're going to see some cool stuff. So what just a reminder of what the scope was for the past 2 weeks is that we have been focusing on our persona Matt, and we're going to continue to focus on Matt over the next little while. So I'm going to talk about that in a second, but just a reminder that Matt is an independent 35-year-old young man. He's in his first year at Sprott Shaw. He's a full-time nursing student who has PD status. So just keep that in mind as we go through and show you, because we are tackling this with Matt in mind. So Matt is going to initiate an application, and he's going to provide his personal information. And that includes things like, is he married? Does he have kids? His residency, citizenship, PD status, was he a former youth in care? Those kinds of things that right now are on the application. So last time we did a demo, it became really clear that we needed to talk a little bit about the business first and just kind of set the scene and make sure that everyone was up to speed with all of those business decisions. So just to tell you a little bit about how we're doing this is that we are building our application in layers. So what we're going to show you right now is Matt beginning to fill out his application. So when Matt says, "No, I'm not married," that means there are some questions that aren't going to show up later on. When Matt says, "No, I don't have children," you're not going to see maybe the pop-up box that might come up for another student who would say, "Yes, I have kids. Let me tell them about them." So just wanted to remind folks to kind of keep that in mind. If there's something not there, it's probably because Matt isn't experiencing that. Just a reminder as well that we have broken the application into 4 parts. So right now we're going to show you the personal information. We have another part which we anticipate will probably be in the next sprint, where we're going to gather Matt's program and institution information. Then we have another part of the application where we gather his financial information. And then the last part of the application where we gather his declaration and any people that he wants us to share information with. And so 4 parts to the application. Just a reminder that Matt is a first-time applicant. So what we're going to show you today is Matt going through this process for the first time, and that might look different than if he was going through it as a subsequent time. But we're not going to show you that today because we haven't built it yet. So for now, we're just going to show you Matt filling out his first ever application for StudentAid BC. Also, just want to remind you that this is not done. We're not showing you a nice, perfectly complete package with all of the UX and the UI and all the pictures and the font in the right size, and even the words aren't necessarily completely done. In fact, we may even have typos. There may even be a duplicate word somewhere. We'll deal with that. So if you could just kind of let some of that stuff go and trust that we'll fix those as we go, and take a look at this at a high level. The last thing, maybe I'll hand it over to you, Andrew, to talk a little bit about the technical side of things and how we're managing that, because we're going to show you the front end, but there's a bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes.
Sure, I'll just pass it over to this section here for a sec. Let you have the floor, Andrew.
Sure.
Twanker.
So I guess the first thing there is sort of focused solutioning. So something we're doing as a team is trying to just take one bite at a time. So there might be some things that we say like we're not there yet, or we're working on it, or will be. And that's partly because of, as everyone knows, the system is very large and complex. So just taking one bite at a time. For example, like something like the SABC integration stuff on how to make that better in our sort of new system and on our new platform and with some of the service providers. And that's sort of leading into the integration overview. So something we're doing is taking a look at everything that we will be integrating with and just seeing if there is a technical way of implementing it better for not just us, but the other side as well. And then the last thing there is sort of technical standards. So something that I think I've said in every one of these so far is we're trying to just do things sort of according to the industry standards for all the technical implementation. So any sort of reasoning of, well, why'd you guys do that technically, or this and that on the technical level is just industry standards for the most part, where we're not really making anything up. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so the reason we're focusing on ATBC is because Matt has a permanent disability. Is that right?
That's correct.
So yeah, so that's the problem we're working on solving right now. And yeah, we're trying to stay away from anything customized. We're trying to look to the industry to see what the best practices are, and to other ministries, what they're doing, so we don't have to recreate the wheel. Okay, so that's our business context and some architectural setup in a nutshell. Now I'm going to pass the mic over to you, Roop, and you're going to set us up for the application workflow.
Yes, hello. So what did we do this past sprint? And what do we want to share with you guys? So I've been working in the background on a little bit of the wireframes for all of this stuff, but I wanted to have the discussion today at a higher level, so we're not focused on the where on the page is that particular question and all that kind of good stuff. I wanted to kind of give you a feel for what things we're asking and the reason why we're asking them at what stage. So like we mentioned, we're covering Matt's full-time student path, and he is kind of the driver for how we're kind of heading forward in this. The other thing is that with this new form, we try to put as many make or break questions up front, just so they know that, hey, heads up, if you answer quote unquote incorrectly for a student loan, you are not necessarily going to be qualified, but we're not going to stop them. And then, yeah, we wanted to kind of show information as it relates to each student type. So like Elise mentioned, if they don't have dependents, there's no need to see all the questions that relate to dependents. Let's show them information that is only pertinent to them, so they don't get confused. And also it kind of limits that mental load that you see looking at a giant form. And the other thing was, I'm thinking now about how much transparency can we bring to that student as possible as they go through this process. I know there have been some conversations outside of this project about maybe we have a calculator for the student on the main StudentAid BC website, high level thinking there. Maybe we relate that, bring some of that over into this form as well. So give them a bit of an idea of what's to come potentially, not set in stone yet. And then finally, what we're thinking about next is really the follow-up. How do you notify a student about the application lifecycle? In the case of an independent student such as Matt, there might not be a spouse or a parent that they need to rely on, say for their income and things like that. So when we get to that stage, what are we going to do for them to help them along the way? So let's go ahead and dig into that first section there. Can everyone see the different section names? Is that big enough? So
that's better.
Okay. So yeah, we've broken it down into a few particular sections. So we've got our personal information, our program and institution information, or school, if you're cool, financial information, as well as the confirmation and kind of submission section. So let's dig into what's in the personal information section. So citizenship and residency is probably the first thing. It's a big, let me block that so no one moves that accidentally. Yeah, citizenship and their BC residency status. Questions about their bankruptcy. Wait a minute, doesn't that seem like it should fit in the financial section? Maybe, but it is a disqualifier, so that's why it's here, but we're having that discussion. The other thing that we wanted to kind of let you guys know is this isn't set in stone. So if you see something on this workflow that seems out of place or doesn't belong, or maybe this doesn't need to be asked at all, let us know, because this isn't set in stone, like we mentioned. We're still in the throes of this student aid application, so let us know if something seems amiss. Date of high school attendance to kind of let us know if they are an independent or if they're a dependent based on that. Relationship status, in case we want to date them. Dependents, full-time job status. So if they're working too much, do they even qualify? Their Aboriginal status, their PD status or permanent disability status, their youth in care status if they had been a youth in care or former youth in care. And then some sections about saving personal information. So this is kind of the starting stage of you kind of set it and forget it, maybe potentially in the future, where if you are hoping for a student loan on an ongoing basis, then when you come back, you don't need to fill in these basics that essentially would equate to a copy and paste of your last application, allowing them to save that for future. And then also granting third-party access. So can your mom call in and ask about the student loan in the future? Okay, let's move on to the next one. Program and institution. So in this section, because it's a full-time student, I know that you have the ability to add in individual courses as well if you're a part-time student, for example. But for now, we're just focusing on a program and a school. And when we get to this in this next little bit here, we're not worrying about what if my school's not listed, what if my program isn't listed. We're going to get to that, but for now it's happiest path. So, hey, look, your program's in here and everything works. The next one is the financial information. So we're going into the funding options, whether they want loans, loan and grant, or whatever variety they want of that. Their personal income questions, childcare costs if they have dependents, living situation and travel costs if they're living out of town and they need to travel home. That kind of equates into that calculation. And then income assistance for persons with disabilities. We are hoping this one can be answered by CRA or elsewhere, or do we even need this last question? Maybe we don't. Do we need that question? Show of hands. Whoever has their video on. Do you feel like that's important?
This is the lovely question on the application that says, if you're, tell us how much money from income assistance you received if you are a person with disabilities. It's a fun question.
Outside of their income. We got one hand up there.
Yeah.
Is that a hand up like question or hand up like I think we don't need it?
No, I think we need it.
Okay, feels like we need it.
The reason why we're focusing on that is because of Matt right now.
Yep.
Right.
Matt. Yeah.
And that is different than the regular income then, hey? Like does it calculate differently than just regular income?
Nope. No,
Yeah.
it has to do with the fact that we have an interface policy agreement with SDPR and we've agreed to share some information with them. So it's how we gather that information to share.
Okay. If anyone has anything to add in that, feel free to add it in the chat, or I just cut someone off, so feel free to continue to talk.
We're talking about are you on PD and receiving benefits through ministry, the interface policy?
Yep.
So what that does is during the assessment, it means that we don't give them the benefit of their living costs. We just ignore them completely.
Yeah.
So while we don't necessarily look at it from a dollar for dollar, if you meet our minimum amount of $1,500, that means we don't give you any sort of living costs in your assessment. So that's pretty dramatic in how it affects.
Yep.
Okay, good to know. Thanks so much, Nicola. Okay, next moving on to, that was Nikki, right? I just want to double check.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I know voices now. We're on the third one. Okay, confirm submission. The final one is just showing you all of the fields you had entered. we talked yesterday about ability to see maybe like a snapshot of the different sections, so you get a taste for your financials and a taste for your personal information, stuff like that, with the ability to edit. Can we zoom in just a bit more, Michelle, for
Yes.
the share? The next one was, this was kind of that transparency thing I asked for. It's +1 transparency I added. It's maybe showing an estimated award based on the business logic we're already going to use. I don't know. Maybe it could work. Maybe we don't want to give that much of a window inside of our process. We're still deciding on that. Finally, at the bottom, it's our declaration to say that I believe I'm not lying to you, and then also the verification consent to say that StudentAid BC can take my information and shop it around to wherever we need to confirm it all. And then finally, on that last screen in this flow here, because Matt is an independent student and there isn't a lot of other things we need to check in on, maybe we can show in the last screen there, if you want to scroll up a bit there. Yep. Just show, hey, potentially what your estimated award would be or what your next steps would be. Most likely, we mentioned yesterday that you're probably going to have some other steps. Confirming income of a spouse, confirming income of a parent, as an example. And just on this page, giving them a bit of a roadmap of what's to come next, maybe some timelines potentially. But yeah, just giving them, so they don't just feel like it's gone into the ether and we don't know what's going to happen next. Just giving them some assurance that it's been received and all that. So yeah, that's the full-time independent student flow.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Roop. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Schwenker, but before I do, I should say I'm going to paste the mural board into the chat. For some reason, when you're in Mural, the Zoom is weird. So I encourage you to follow along in Mural directly. If you can't, then we have to rely on my screen share. And also, yeah, we'll try and leave the rest of the questions to the end of the session. Okay. Andrew, Schwenker, you wanted to set us up before we start our product review?
Yeah, actually, I think Elise summed up most things there, but from the technical side, like just as a quick little caveat is we aren't persisting the data as of right now, and we're not running an assessment or anything off of it. But that's pretty much it. I think Elise covered everything else.
Okay, and so just to recap, in this sprint, we enabled Matt. He can start. So let me back up just 1 second. So in the last sprint, we showed you that Matt can log in and he can authenticate his information with BC Services card. And now in sprint 2, he can start his financial aid application. He can come in and reconfirm that the profile information is correct, and then he can start providing information in the personal information section. And these are all the fields that we've covered here. So now I'll pass it over to you, Prashant, and you can give us a demo.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. So yeah, let me share my screen. My screen is visible to you guys?
It is.
Okay, I think Alice and Andrew already mentioned that this sprint we are basically focusing on collecting personal information for a student financial aid application. And previous sprint we are basically create login and the basic account creation of a student. So I'll start from our login screen. So yeah, now our user consider the Matt can log in using their BCSC card. So we are currently using this, virtual card testing mechanism because we don't have actual card setup. So after login, basically this user is already logged in, so we know that. So we'll basically redirect him to the student dashboard page or home screen where they can start their first application. So yeah, we are saying that, okay, you can now start their first financial aid application. So whenever user click start, we landing in this page. It is a welcome page with some additional instruction. This nice lady will, help Matt to finish his application. So now we am starting with the personal information, and that was the only section so far we developed. So there is nothing more. So here what we are currently doing, we are, this information is already saved. Some of this information is coming from the BC service card, like full name, date of birth and gender, and some of the information we are already saved during the profile creation. So we are, showing this information to the user. They can confirm this information by confirming them. If they want to change, they can go here and they can change, like they can change their address, anything like that, ABC, and they, if they can save their profile information, and again if they go start their application, this particular change it will be passed. So they can change even they, so if they are fine with their this profile information, they confirm and they can move forward. So I think Rup already shown the steps or the questionnaire for the overall personal information collection is consist of citizen and residency. So you can select from the following options. So yeah, the Matt for Matt case is he's a Canadian citizenship, and yes, he's lived in the BC, and no bankruptcy for him. And you can specify any past date for high school attendance, relationship status single, no employment, and no general status, and no youth of care, and no for the permanent disability.
Matt does have a permanent
Oh,
disability.
sorry. Yes, sorry, Mas. Sorry. Thank you, Michelle, for that. Yes, this is the the pretty straightforward the questionnaire for their personal information. And currently we are not validating this data, so this validation will be performed when we are basically submitting the application. It's basically we are collecting the information and establishing the workflow. Yeah, and currently there is no next because these steps are there but they are not even developed. So if you do a next state, it will just bring you in this page, and this next sprint we will develop this whole select program and other portion of the application. Yeah, that's it, I think.
Awesome. Thank you, Pushan. I think one of the key points here is when they go to update and confirm their information, their profile information, it actually redirects them back to the profile page separate from the application. May not look that way. It looks because the headers are all the same, but they actually are going back to their profile instead of saving it on their application. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Also, I want to mention one more thing. I think that was a part of last sprints work, but we are not able to demonstrate that. Okay, now you for this application, because consider in our application, if you go to our profile, you'll find there is a two section of the information. One information, you can say the grayed out information, which is basically read only information for our application. It's coming from the BC services card. And this is our information which we are collecting to create your account. So now you can change the BC services card information and they will be reflecting in our system. How we can do that? So test ID, right?
ID test.
ID test, yeah. ID.
It's just gov.bc.ca.
.ca. This is the currently this link is not completely right because it's going to actual ID account, but we are using test IDs, so that's why you are going to ID test gov.bc.ca, where you can log in with your existing BC services card. Similar way how we can log into our application. And
So this is important what Poojan is showing, because in particular, the email information is now kept through BC Services Card. So what Poojan is showing you is, for example, how a student might update their email address. It's very simple, and we wouldn't do it for them. So instead of students sending us an email saying, please do this, we would tell them to go to BC Services Card, sign in. As you can see, select your email preferences, update your email preference, save it, and then it will be reflected in our system. So it's an important change for folks.
I like how it's distinguished on the login page as well. Like this is the information attached to, even though the email wasn't showing at the top, but this is the email, or this is the information attached to your services card. This is the information that is directly connected to SABC. So this is where and how you make the changes. I think that's really helpful to make that distinction on the login page there.
Great, thank you.
A question for you, if I may. Is there any possibility or thought around letting a student have a second email address on the SABC side that is not verified? We find a lot of our students use their school's email address while they're in studies so that they're getting their information. You know, maybe they don't use their Gmail account. It's got everything and its dog going to it, but they like their school stuff going to their SFU account. But they don't, but because the BC Services Card is for multiple ministries, as it's continuing to be used more and more, they don't want to change it on that end. Is there any sort of possibility around that, or thought to that, or why that's bad? Or that was the reason for wanting to keep the email address at our side. Kind of like a home mailing address can be different than what's on the services card. The email address I kind of see as the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Nikki, and you're right. Lots of people have more than one address and they use their email for different things. At this point, we, from an MVP perspective, our plan is to use the BC Services Card, but it's absolutely something we'll want to think about as we go forward.
Cool. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, like as we look forward, it could be one of those selections, like where you add it in your SABC information and say, this is the email address I want you to send any SABC information to, and like tick the box so that it's selected.
Yeah, it's something that we could add to for sure. And this is where, you know, we're starting to bump into the MVP versus that desired future state. And for right now, we're definitely going to focus on the absolute must-haves for the MVP, and those nice to have, configurable as we mature into it and live in it for a while. We can definitely make those enhancements in the future, but for now, we're going to stick with one way of gathering their email.
Yeah, great.
Any other questions?
Sorry.
Go ahead. Is that Poojan? Sorry, I didn't see you there.
Let me finish, you know.
Okay,
So basically you can see that already email is updated at the, you know, the BC Services Card. Now we can log out. The problem with our current application, we don't, you know, develop the logout features. So what I have to do, I have to close the this tab, and okay, and I have to again, you know, open a new incognito window. Let me share, I think. Okay. So yeah, so I have to, you know, re-log in to see my account changes here, because we don't have logout functionality. If we develop logout functionality, this whole flow will be much easier.
So you're going to show us that when you sign in again and in a future state, when you refresh, that the email address has been changed because we pull it from the BC Services Card.
Yes, absolutely.
I know we talked about this in the past. The pull from SABC, or sorry, from Services Card, I mean, that happens on login. Is that correct? Like when we're pulling that new updated email as an example? So it would require a logout in the future as well.
So basically this information every time because this, whole information is managed by, middleware called Keycloak. It's a, identity manager, which is basically, connecting Keycloak with our BC services card with our application. So Keycloak is managing and, and the owner of this whole data. So whenever user log in, user going to BC services card and come back to our application, this account information is refreshed. So we are not pulling information from BC services card until unless we are going to, relog in to the, to the account. Yeah, that is the current flow right now.
Awesome. Thank you.
So yeah,
Prashant.
you can see that, yeah, email is already changed. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. You guys have accomplished a lot in 2 sprints. So I really appreciate
So I
that.
do just want to summarize then, right? So what we've shown you last week was student logs in using their BC services card, and that card is authenticated. And then what we've shown you today, and of course there's all kinds of stuff in the background for that to happen. And then today what we've shown you is the beginning of an application. And so Matt started his application and he started to fill out his information for the first time. So really pretty cool and exciting. And of course, going forward, we're meeting this afternoon to talk about Sprint 3. Thanks, Michelle. But what we're thinking at this point is that for the next sprint, we want to continue working with Matt. We want to support Matt to complete his financial aid application. So provide his institution and program information, as well as provide his financial information and then complete his declaration and get all the way to the point where he submits his application. We're hopeful. We have a meeting this afternoon. We may not get that far, but we're hoping that we may be able to get that far and kind of have Matt done his application so that in a future sprint, we'll actually start doing the hard work of, okay, how do we assess this? How do we send Matt's information off to be verified with CRA? Because, I was about to say Matt had a credit check, but he wouldn't have a credit check because Matt's 35. So, or he would have a credit check because he's 35, over 22. So anyway, those kinds of things. We're going to keep working with Matt and follow him through. And then of course, there's a bunch of work that we need to do behind the scenes. So we're starting to get ready for the rules to how do we assess Matt's application. And because Matt has PD, we also, and this is his first application, we also need to have some linkage with SABC to help us gather that PD status information and complete that assessment. So we'll be working on those pieces as well. Pretty cool.
Awesome. So now we can launch into your fury of comments and questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping. I see smiling faces. Okay, Neve, go ahead.
I was just wondering about the employment status and the decision to make it I think it's a set it and forget it piece of information. I think it's, are you employed in this study period? Are you a full-time employee in a study period rather than,
yeah.
Presumably your residency would change less than your employment.
Yeah, just to be clear, that's certainly not a decision, and you're absolutely right, Neve. That particular question is one that the answer to could change from application to application. So we need to make sure that we find a way to make it easy for students to answer that question. And that there are some questions that are less likely to change. For example, date you graduated high school. Presumably that shouldn't change from application to application. So yeah, I think just an example of where we're thinking about the idea of next time Matt applies, perhaps we show him the answers to the questions he gave last time and allow him to make edits. So those are the kinds of things we're thinking about. You're absolutely right. That's one that could change.
And those questions, I think I heard they're not validated at that stage. They're valid.
At this point in time, they're not validated until the student hits submit. So they can edit, make changes, and when the student, I mean, obviously we're not there yet, but at this point, the thinking is that when the student gets to submit, that's when we do a little bit more of a check, not only just to make sure that they have answered all the required questions, but that there's some basic validations there. So that allows the student to make changes, to save it, to come back 3 days later and change their answer, those kinds of things, all the way through until they press submit.
But so they won't be nudged that they're ineligible until they submit?
Sorry, no. So we haven't shown you anything, so we haven't built it yet. But what you're talking about is, for example, student says, no, I'm not a BC resident. So yeah, we have not yet built the idea that a warning message would come up. Absolutely, that's still in the plan. We just haven't built it yet.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I see one from David Malcolm in the chat. It's only when student gets to the submission area that they get their FOIPA required collection notice. Did you want to talk about that, David? Okay.
Basically, the use, we can't really be reaching out and checking elements unless we have passed a collection notice in front of the student. Maybe that can be loaded up front. It has been our practice to only have it after completely entered all of their information so that we can check any of it and not bombard, but hit them repeatedly with collection notice, collection notice, collection notice.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a social insurance number validation. Can't happen until somehow they have given us permission to do so.
Right.
That's correct. That's how it will work, right? Because we're just, there's no validation done until they submit. Submit is when that happens. So.
Yeah. Yeah, they need to give us the authority to collect the information, and only then can we do something with it. So, yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Neve, I see your hands up again.
So just back to our ability to nudge folks, then does that mean we can't assess the information to tell them if they're eligible until they receive a collection notice?
David, I don't think you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that so in the demo, student answers, there's a question about, are you a BC resident? And in this case, we showed you yes. In a future state, because we know that Matt is, in a future state, if someone answers no, what we are thinking is that if you select no, then a little warning message that would come up that would say, hey, heads up, non-BC residents are not eligible for. It's information. It's not part of the final assessment. It's just a warning notice, right? I don't think that that's a concern. I don't believe that's an issue. Is it, David?
It is not an issue. It is only reaching out externally and taking the information provided and using it and disclosing it that requires the FOIPA notice.
And that's
Right.
covered by the consent and the declaration, which happens at submit before we go out to those third parties. So we're good.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yes.
It will become more evident in a little bit sprint or two down the road when some of these things are fleshed out a little bit more as well. About here, because this is pre-submission. This is just like the validation that comes up because you entered a number wrong, or if you say I'm not a BC resident, we're going to be like, what's your point? But so that will become evident. But once you hit submit, and that's when that consent happens, that's when all the actual validation can then perform, and that moves forward to the CRA and all those things. So.
Yeah, it's kind of like almost just formatting kind of stuff, right? Where you enter the date you graduated high school, but you entered it in the wrong format. The system will say, oh, you know, this needs to be in the right format. It's not actually using the information. It's simply making sure the data quality gets in properly.
Awesome. Thank you for these great questions. Anything else, guys? Elise, do you have any questions for the group?
I'm a little bit surprised it's so quiet, which always makes me nervous, and I can't see your faces. But I just wanted to flag a couple of things for you. So I don't want to stir the pot, but I do want to call out a few obvious things. What you'll note, or maybe what you didn't note, is that Matt did not select, I want to apply for a full-time or I want to apply part-time. You'll notice that we're trying to move away from that concept a little bit and moving more and more towards, tell us about yourself, tell us about your situation, and we'll help you get to the right place. So I'm hoping that the experience for students is going to be a lot easier, and then there won't be this problem of, oh, I filled out the wrong one. No, you provided us with the information, and we were able, and based on what you provided us, we were able to make sure you got to the right place. So really trying to focus on that. And then I do just want to flag as well that, as we kind of mentioned, this is Matt's first application. So this is the first time he's been asked about residency, youth in care, all those kinds of things. The next time, which we don't have to show you today, but I do want to flag that the next time Matt applies, we will still have that information kept inside of his account. And that's where we're going to essentially reuse it and say, hey, is this still all correct? Do you need to make some adjustments to help reduce the amount of answers that Matt has to fill in on the application and make the process faster and more efficient for him? So that's something that we plan on doing, but of course, giving him the ability to edit. And in a really future state, not MVP, but in a future state, of course, yeah, we need to track, hey, wait a minute, Matt, you told us in your first application that you graduated in June of 2019, but then in subsequent applications, you told us you graduated in June of 2017. We've got some quality assurance issues here, and maybe we need to look at that and see what was accurate, and did we inappropriately assess you in a certain way. So that's a future state. That's more of those kind of verifications, quality assurance pieces. So, but for now, we just need to make sure that we capture that information and that we improve the data quality.
Yeah. Awesome. I see a question about possible to see the work in Sprint 1. Absolutely. For context, you're welcome to look above in this board here. We have all the details about Sprint 1 just above it here. And then also Adrian has a recording of that. And we're just working on editing. Roop is a videographer in his other life, and he can edit it down to just showing you the product review and his little demo of the workflow. So Adrian will be putting that up on a Teams library for us to view. Should be up there shortly, so you'll be able to have a look at that. Another questions. I agree with Sid. The amount of progress in the initial sprints is very impressive. Oh, thanks, Ben. Thanks, Sid. Lori, I see you have a question.
Hi, yes. Well, once again, I want to reiterate my comment. Have never used Mural before. Don't laugh. I don't know if that's a funny thing or not, but it's impressive. And so happy to see that. Question I have, and if it's just a newbie question, I can address it later. That's fine too. But I see from the questions at the initial stage that it is automatically assumed it's bringing not for Matt's case because he answered no to former youth in care, but it is automatically bringing those applications together. That's an assumption for both tuition waiver and I think it was YEEF. Is that the assumption? And that seems obviously logical to me, but is that what's happening there?
So what will happen, obviously we can't show it today, but will happen in a future state is not Matt, but another one of our personas will get to that question and will say, yes, I was a former youth in care. And then we're going to need to go down that path. What we anticipate at this point is that at bare minimum, we're going to say, hey, you may be eligible for these programs. Do you want to pursue them a little bit? And then it probably will open some other questions that we might ask them if they are interested in applying for those programs. But those questions wouldn't come available for someone that wasn't. And just because you were a former youth in care doesn't necessarily mean that you're eligible for YEEF or tuition waiver. So that's why we want to, it's an indicator, but not a direct link. So our plan is to build that out a little bit. Once we get, I believe it's Jessica is our persona that is a former youth in care. And so once we start working on that, then we're going to add that next layer to this application that says, okay, what if you said yes? Then what happens? And so we'll start working on that, but that'll be a couple of sprints from now. So we're going to keep working on the easy, quote, happy path of Matt. Now.
Okay. May I ask a follow-up question then, more specific to Matt, actually, which is a person with disability. So the reference to SABC, and I know that there is a mini project, if I'm not mistaken, and that is how that. So thank you. That's brought all of that together in my mind as to the question that is right now being examined as to how that works and fits within that.
Yeah, and just to, because I can, and of course Jamie will correct me if I get it wrong, but of course. Matt, this is Matt's first time that he's applied. So we're going to have to go through a process with Matt, but there may be other students that have applied in the past and have already been assessed as having PD status. And so we're going to need to make sure that we use that information from our current system and pull that information forward. So we're also going to work on something that says, hey, check to make sure that we haven't previously assessed Matt, because maybe we assessed him 3 months ago, or maybe he's never been assessed before. But we are going to look at building that in so that we make sure that students with a previously assessed PD don't need to go through that process again, and that the process is efficient for that person.
That's 100% correct. Just to make sure.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not going to correct you. That is absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't get into the details. We'll work on that, but that's our plan. And so for right now, though, this is where it gets tough. For right now, we're talking about Matt, who's a first-time applicant, and we found that this approach with these kind of layers is helping us start. Otherwise, there's so much, right? The application is this big. There's so many permutations. And so we went, you know what, let's go down the path with Matt and let's follow his journey. And then let's add the layers on as we go. So by the end of it, not today, but by the end of all of this, we should be able to say, okay, let's put the personas on. Let's take a different person with different attributes. Let's make sure that we've thought about all of that, but we had to start somewhere. And so Matt's number was up, and so we're starting with Matt. So some of the things you're not seeing right now because Matt doesn't have those attributes, but we haven't forgotten about them.
No, for sure. No, it's just great to see, and I can see where other things will pop up, and I appreciate that. So thank you, and particularly with the areas that now are coming up that are now newly in my area of purview, right? And so it's helpful to see that. Thank you.
Yes, we are earning our problems as we go through. So let's start with this one.
Yeah.
Michelle, I love that. I love that. Just earning problems, proving we can handle them, and then taking them on.
Yeah, one at a time.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? Looking at the chat, looking at my screen, looking at your faces, looking. Okay. I think we're probably good for the day. Do you have any closing remarks, Elise?
I guess just want to say thank you to everybody. I know that this is pushing us into new and exciting places. So thank you for bearing with us, and also just a continued invitation that as this percolates, you know, something may come up in 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days. Please reach out to any of us. We have different feature owners. We meet regularly. Myself or any of the team members, just reach out. Rebecca, Neve, Steve, there's lots of folks, all of the team leads in the service delivery area, as well as the other directors. Everyone's doing what we can. So if you have any questions or thoughts, reach out. Don't wallow in confusion, because maybe we could join you. Maybe we should be equally confused, or maybe we've already kind of worked through that and can solve that. So yeah, please reach out and continue to come check out the demos, because it's pretty cool. And I do want to say that thanks to everybody for showing up and your continued interest, because it's as you can see, it's moving fast and pretty exciting.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Super. Thanks, team.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.